We're not sure really what it is devising. We think we know what it isn't. So we're going to start on that note. And if any of you have any thoughts about that question, that strange D word, devising, so please don't hesitate with contributing. And then after that, we'll pose some questions which has to do with strategies, which has to do with the audience, and which has to do with history and presence. And please don't forget what we talked about, because it was really good to have that sort of whole room discussion, not just on stage, but also involving you guys. So that's what I want to say before we start. And of course, this panel has been neatly and carefully picked by Øystein Ulstein Dager and the arranger of this festival for a certain reason, and probably because they're competent people, and it will be pleasurable to be with you for this. We're a little bit running over time, and we have a great expectations of the sadness and joy of Giraffe, so we won't break the time limit. It will be performed when it's supposed to, Tiago. So we'll have about 35, 40 minutes, so we have to be precise.
We have to talk very quick.
Yeah. But we also have to, be nice to our audience, so not too quick. Yeah, so they can understand us.
I'm joking.
With me here, I have... you can just say your name, can't you?
Yes, my name is Nils Petter Morland, and I'm the artistic director at the andre teateret, or the other theater in English. And it's a small venue with 165 seats, not so far from here in the European scale, but in the Norwegian scale, it's quite a distance. It's a very young theater. We've been having our doors open for 2.5 years, and our work is based on improvisation, both as a performance style, but also as a devising technique or like a method for us to make plays. We do work for adults, youth, and kids.
And kids are the things.
30.
Sort of
Yeah.
Kids are.
I'm 38 years old. I don't know if there's anything more I should have said, but...
We'll get back to the rest. Christina Ros from Barnteaterakademien.
Yes.
Very briefly about you. What is Barnteaterakademien? That's nice to know.
Yes, Barnteaterakademien is the Academy of Children's Theatre, and it's based in Gothenburg, and it is a Gothenburg thing. It's financed through the committee, the Culture Committee of Gothenburg. And our main goal is to stimulate new text for children, children's theatre, and we also arrange debates, and we compiled this anthology about devising, and there are a bunch of those over there. You can pick one if you want.
Can you say briefly what's in it? Is it articles, or is it text, other kinds of texts, or?
It's a mixture of articles from certain. All are written by all professionals or theoretical people, and it's a mixture of longer essays and shorter questions and answers from different. So it's in Swedish though, so you have to.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know.
Take a course in Swedish if you don't mention. I also have other identity as a dramaturg at Masthugsteatern in Gothenburg.
And we could talk at length about that as well, but we won't, because we will then turn to Lisbeth from the teatermakere.
Yeah, I'm Lisbeth from the teatermakere. I'm a director at first. Used to be an actress, so that I have in common with some others here. I'm a director, and I work already very long in the teatermakere, which is a company who makes performances for children, youngsters, and, as Teresa already said, all the adults in their lives. And that's really important, because I really believe that making theater in the theater should be all the generations. Then you really have a kind of lively atmosphere. But we do play also, of course, for schools, but we try to involve as much as adults as we can, because we think when you go with your child to the theater, then something really happens. And we make a lot of new texts. We commission like 3 or 4 new texts each year, and we play texts from other countries, and we devise a lot of classical texts. So, for example, I did Mother Courage for children from 6. So then you can imagine that you have to devise it a little bit.
And we'll again return to the word device and what it is that happens when you devise something. Because maybe it's not a definition, maybe it's a kind of action. I think maybe that's what we talked about that during dinner, that devising is not a certain thing, but is a thing that exists, it's a thing that you do. It's a way of doing something. More about that later. Peder, Theater Grimsborken.
Yes, my name is Peder Opstad, Artistic Director of Theater Grimsborken. We've been working for at least 12 years. Based in Oslo. I've got a huge office in my kitchen. And we tour all over Norway. And mainly we play for kids and a young audience. We do about 300 to 400 shows a year.
What did you say? Can you repeat that, please?
I can repeat that. We do approximately 300 to 400 shows a year.
And how many days are there in a year?
365.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But I don't do them all.
Yeah.
I would go mental.
You've got people working for you.
I got people, yeah.
And it's very interesting. Theater Grimsborken is one of the companies that has done the most touring shows in DKS. And we should probably also explain what DKS is, because it could be interesting also for our guests. Den kulturelle skolesekken is the cultural rucksack, it's called. It was invented by actually an ex-musician working for the county council of Molde, ligger det? Molde ligger det.
Møre og Romsdal,
Møre
West
og
Coast.
Romsdal, which is the county of Norway, in the middle of Norway. Not a very no big cities there, a bit of fishery, but sort of very laid-back place. And it started this idea of the cultural rucksack, which was to bring the theatre and also literature to the schools. And actually it means now that every school in Norway has to have, it's not not written by a doctor, but it's a system that brings theatre to all the schools and all the counties of Norway on a general basis. I think it's 2 times a year they should have.
It varies.
Yeah. And it's also been called the cultural garbage bin, not the rucksack, because there's been a lot of debate about it, about the quality of it and about the way it works. But undoubtedly, it was a big change also for the French theatre in Norway when it came about. And it was the first time that children really met this devising method in their everyday life. So, and if anybody's more curious about that, just talk to me and Peder, and we will try and fill you in on it, this system. Now we also have it for pensioners, for instance, the cultural walking stick it's called. So it's a big growing thing in Norway. Okay, let's just talk about this devising thing. I mean, and please raise your hands in there if any of you want to sort of contribute what you think it is. What is it, Lisbeth, devising?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, really, because there's so many definitions of. I hear myself also very loud. I have to speak very slow.
No, it's nice. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll just tell what I like, because that's easier for me. Because I like very much text, I like very much language, but I also like very much making things together and getting different influences on your work. And for example, when we work in Holland, we work in many different ways with writers, but mainly we work with writers in a very close way. So that they see rehearsals, they get ideas, they go home, they write things. So this is one of the things you do.
And we are teatermakere.
Yeah, we
It's
do it with
your
the
company.
teatermakere.
And what is your part in this company? You are artistic director?
I'm
or?
artistic director and director.
Yeah.
Also.
So you direct as
Yeah.
well.
And the other thing now, I'm very into what is the role of the audience, because I think also how is the audience fitting in, because you have this kind of hierarchy that you used to have. This is the writer, but you are going to talk about it later, so I won't. But this is the writer and we do what the writer say. Then we had this is the director and we do what the director say. And somehow there's always also this we are the artists and you just shut up and you just look at us and you get what we give you. And I'm very interested in how can you involve somehow the audience into your work without giving them the authority on the work, because I think a work of art is a work that comes from the heart and that somebody has to decide somewhere. So it's not a Gesamtkunstwerk, how do you say it? In the end somebody says we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But I'm very interested in how do I get the audience involved, and actually right now I'm working on something that involves lots of little films that youngsters are making into my performance. But
And
very shortly for that.
Yeah, and in that way you are using a method that can be called devised.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
if you
maybe.
work, for instance, with this Mother Courage, Mother Courage, you would also use another method,
Yeah,
which could be called
devised,
devised,
yeah.
and then there's hundreds other.
Yeah. Maybe I can add one thing, because that was for me very combines two things, because I was very interested, somebody I knew had became a mentally disabled child, and so I was very close with the process. And then I decided with my actors to go to homes for mentally disabled people, and mainly really severe mentally disabled people. And we were staying there for like 6 weeks. We were there and we were just helping, washing people or swimming with people or just doing the work. And one day each week we came back and I just asked all the actors, just make a performance, but I don't want you to make a performance about these people. I am absolutely not interested in how that we are portraying them, because we don't understand them. The only thing I'm interested in is how is it affecting you? Mm-hmm. What is it doing with you that you suddenly are in contact with these people? And it was so we did that a lot, and then we had a lot of material, and the beauty of it was that it was material that really came out of the confrontation or the connection with these people, and on the other hand, it was completely personal. And I always think it's very important that when you're on stage, that you're completely personal.
Niels Petter,
I think
you have a very interesting theatre that you post during dinner.
Well, maybe it's making the threshold really high now for me to say anything.
Be
It's
interesting,
really
please.
interesting.
I found it
It's
interesting.
I think it's semi-interesting. No, I think that when we use the term of devising nowadays, it seems like Lisbeth is saying, it covers a wide range of methods and tools to use to make theatre. But for me, it's more like a generational sort of answer to the prior sort of regime in theatre, where we will have the playwright somewhere else delivering the goods, and then the theatre would sort of do their sort of correct way of putting it on stage. So that devising is, for me, it's like an answer to that method, saying it's not an absolute way of making theatre. There's other ways of including all the means inside theatre, and not only through what the text is saying. So to me, devising is a big answer to, for me, a terrible time in theatre. But
That lasted until 1952, I think. Is
well, somewhere around that. I don't know.
Norwegian time. This is
Yeah,
Norwegian history
time. But I think to liberate the actors, the directors, the technical staff, everyone, the designers, everyone, to liberate them from the regime of the playwright was very important. So that we today could have a way of working with all the different sort of tools that you have, also the playwright, in a way that people can actually combine their knowledge.
That's the playwrights coming to get you now.
I know. But because, like you say, that there's devising different kind of devising techniques. The most important thing for me when I use it is the fact that I can connect with or can make the actors connect with something for them personal, for them very private even maybe, and let that influence the work in another way than just an acting method. Because in different methods you can do that as well, but for me, for the content, for the real content that what ends up on stage, I think that is what differs devising from a sort of traditional way of putting up a play.
Yeah. Christina, so of course you've made this anthology of all these different texts on devising. You probably spent a long time thinking on it and around it. But Nils Petter is also touching on a topic that I know that you are very keen on. In Sweden, you're not keen on it, but it's been very, very intensely debated in Sweden. And devising, as Nils Petter says, a tool for breaking down hierarchies in the theatre. Can you just first say something about that, and then say something about your thoughts on devising afterwards?
Okay. Yeah, we have arranged a couple of similar seminaries actually in Gothenburg and at Bibu, that is biennial. Do you say it biennial?
Biennial, yeah.
In the south of Sweden, Lund.
It's a festival for theatre for young and
in some of them, not all, but in some of them, there has been a strong focus on the aspect of democracy and breaking down hierarchies in the process towards an audience, rather than talk about the actual form of the performance. So, and I was a bit curious if that's typical Swedish or something. But I also think it's a matter of who is sitting in the panel and who is talking as well. So, and in our anthology, there are on many levels thoughts on many levels about this.
And can you say something about those thoughts? Are any of those thoughts interesting or relevant for us today that you would like to pick up from the texts in that book?
I think, for instance, if you know who Carolina Frende is, she's the head of Skärholmen, which is one of those big theaters for theater for young people in Sweden. Do you know about her, Carolina Frende? She works very much with devising, and she has a very acute way of describing why it's important for her, and she talks about it very much in political sense. That if you want to describe a moving human existence and identities, you may, if you use devising methods, you will become closer to reality than if you go through an already written text. So she describes it like some kind of almost, I would say, revolutionary, in revolutionary terms, I would say.
And that's also the feeling when I've been to Sweden. It seems like the playwrights, this is the way I understand it from a Norwegian perspective, although we have our Ibsen and the playwright's still very central, but we prefer him to be dead in some way, so we can sort of do what we want with him. But in Sweden, the living playwright has been very, very central and has a very, very core function in the Swedish theatre-making processes. And
I would say it also goes very much hand in hand with the work we're doing in Sweden. I suppose you're doing it as well in your countries, in the gender subject and in the ethnicity subject. And Carolina Frende is one of the heads of we have a few very influential theaters for young people, and they devise almost everywhere in those theaters, and they also work very much with gender. So it comes hand in hand, I think.
So in a way, Shanti, devising in Sweden can have that sort of, be a kind of strategy to break with that pattern that there is a white male directing and commissioning and producing theatre for children and young. So just to come back to that question, that in Sweden this is used as a strategy to break those hierarchies. Peder, you said that when you started working with your own company, that you felt that doing plays in a Norwegian setting was a bit like, not really, it was, you call it, it was a bit like being a cover band, you said.
Yes.
A real company has its own material kind of thing.
I do feel a certain pressure. Being a fringe company, you should have your own material. That's like what people think and say, or at least I feel. But to be honest, when I started Theatre Grimspoken, it was because I was an unemployed actor. I was out of work. And even though I'm now artistic director, manager, producer, technician, driver, blah, 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 stage manager, you know, in my core, I'm still the actor. You know, that's my main thing. All the other stuff, that's just extra activities. So when I choose what to do, it's all about, does this fascinate me as an actor? Would this be fun to do as an actor? Challenging to do as an actor? And would I, as an audience, be willing to pay a ticket to see this show? And when I've chosen, and I'm always looking for a good story, that's the main thing. I'm all about the story. And if I choose a story to do, it doesn't really matter if we are going to devise or pay royalty for a play which is already written and produced in another country, or adapt a book, or whatever. I mean, the story will choose the technique of making the show.
So for you, devising is one of many techniques that you can use.
Yes.
Of course. In your material.
Yes. And also, I think, because my training as an actor was classical. I mean, we did bloody Shakespeare for a whole year, and then Chekhov, and, you know, all that shit. And I was, the regime of that school was very strict.
Can we ask you what school it was?
The Arts Educational Drama School in Chiswick, London.
Yeah.
It's a different regime there now, but it was all about method acting. And it took me 16 years before I could go back to London, because I just needed, you know, distance and time and space. And the main training for me as an actor was after that drama school, because, for example, I found a lot of inspiration from Theatre Complicité in London and from other companies in Norway, Intervju, for example. So I'm always trying to find inspiration. I mean, how do you work? How do you work? And it's always about, can I learn something and develop myself as an actor?
If anybody wants to say anything, have any comments from the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
There's a question from the top. I was wondering what role, as you're discussing script-based versus devising, and devising uses text. So do you get playwrights in to collaborate in the devising process? Do you use dramaturgs to arrange text that you generate? Is it purely from you as lead creator, or is it collab? I mean, endless questions. But yeah, what role is playwright or dramaturg in devising?
I would like to say something there. I can see devising is very central for many companies, not everywhere. And in some companies, I think they haven't come so far yet. They are still in the playground situation where democracy is most important, and they see a chance perhaps of saving money and don't having to pay for money for a dramatist. And in those cases, no one writes, and perhaps no one even has the mandate to have first, you know, I decide. Normally there is some kind of director, but often not a writing person in some cases. And in more developed
societies
cases, they start using dramatists and take them into this devising processes.
I think, Lisbeth, you in
for
Holland
me-
it's been...
For me, it's very important to work with a writer. Not always, but first of all, I love language, and I think it's not only that I love language, it's also that I think there's a lot of movement in language, because we always think that there is movement in other things, but for me, there's image and movement in language, and I also think that we know that language defines us also in a way. So if a word gets lost in the language, I'm pretty sure the feeling gets lost in the society. So I really like to work with people who can write, because I tried it sometimes. I sit with a white paper and I think I can do it, and it doesn't come out the way I want it. So, but there are also lots of different ways that you can work with writers, and especially in Holland, we have writers. They say, "Please leave me alone. Get away from me. Don't talk at me. Just let me work and do what you want with it." But there's also a lot of writers who really are, you can have a conversation with, or who are in the rehearsals, or who are taking text from completely other different sources, you know, that they take text from political speeches, or they take text from children, but I strongly myself believe that in the end it's really good when the writer just put his beautiful language, his knowledge of language, or his talent, you could say, much more over it, because I think it works. For me, it can touch me more.
So it means that instead of the playwright being someone that works outside the theatre laboratory, the playwright is one of the experts in the theatre laboratory, working together with the rest.
Yeah. And I do talk a lot because we have lots of plays commissions, so I talk a lot. And it's always different. With one writer, he doesn't want to hear anything, and I'm completely fine with that. And another writer really wants to be all the time and I'm completely fine, because you get also different work. And I always think that you have to find the place where somebody is at his strongest, because then I get the strongest work.
Eivind had a very interesting question in the last session. He asked, what kind of connections is it between the different working processes and the aesthetic result? Is there also one of the reasons for devising being big again in Scandinavia? It is true, like Michael said, it was big also in the 60s and the 70s, and we just sort of forgotten about it. It's like concrete poetry is forgotten and rediscovered by a new generation as a new thing. I mean, this is how it goes in these waves, but is it also a longing for new aesthetics or a new kind of artistic result that we no longer find in the plays or in the traditional way of doing it? I'm asking you, Christina, first, and then I can ask Nils Petter afterwards.
Positively,
Yeah.
yes. In my case, yes.
Yeah.
And I think so generally too. And I think it's both a matter of a longing and an urge to see, to experience scenic work which stands up to the complex world we're living in, like you talked about in the earlier sitting here. And so it's both sort of urge for sort of political and philosophical representation, and also I think it's simply you need always something moving. You can't sit seeing the same kind of theater year after year. You have to. Theater has to be as mobile as humanity is.
And
so
you don't think writers are mobile?
Yeah.
Just a question.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so
okay.
you may find dramaturgy that
No,
is-
but in Sweden,
yeah,
I mean in
absolutely.
Sweden.
In Sweden, perhaps.
Do you
no,
think
I
the
think
writers in Sweden
I
are
think
mobile to go
I
with
think
that?
perhaps Swedish, when you
Yeah.
ask me, perhaps Swedish playwrights don't really experiment so much, I think, with different dramaturgies. No.
Okay, here I was curious.
So then,
what we're
then of course, it's
To make it specific, you're saying that there has
Yeah.
been a certain, not only a certain tradition in Swedish writing, but also a certain dramaturgical tradition that the Swedish writers sort of put themselves into. Yeah.
Okay.
Nils Petter?
I think that I would like more people to make theater where they are inspired. So when I see them that they're inspired, when they're on stage, they're inspired and they're telling stories or themes or images that they are inspired by themselves. And I think that if you choose a goal clearly enough for what you want to say, I think somehow you can trust that the method would pick you. If you need to involve a writer early on, you should. If you shouldn't, you shouldn't. I've done a whole range, a whole scale of different ways of using dramaturgs or writers, or no dramaturgs, nothing at all. We even did an improvised show for kids that had no script in any way. So I think people should really look for where their inspiration lies. And I think that the real question of devising, which is interesting, is the question if it does it produce different material? Different kind of techniques, does it produce different material? If it's different, is it better? And is it more inspired? If it helps people make more inspired theater, I'm good with it. I don't care if a performance is badly performed, if the people are inspired. If really, I can see really poor actors, but if they're really inspired to tell their story, I'm happy with it. I would much more like to see that for a lifetime than to see people do stuff that they think they should do. Either they pick a method they think they should use because it's contemporary or interesting or in any way sort of something that they feel they should do. It gives me no satisfaction whatsoever. And that's the only thing I'm looking for when I'm in theater. I want to be satisfied. I want to have a good time. I'll either have to look at someone who tells me something they think is really important, or they have to have a good time. If they can do both at the same time, I'm really happy. But I can watch either. And then I think if you start with the goal of being inspired in front of your audience, I think the method and your use of a writer would come. If you need text, and if you need the text to be good, you should have a writer. If you need text, but the text doesn't have to be good, don't bother use the money. Buy nice lights or anything if you feel that, yeah.
I'm going to get back to you, Peder, because I want to fill you in as well. But Tiago, I was just going to, before you raise your hand in the air, I think this is your moment, right? Yeah?
No.
I felt...
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can start a little bit.
I totally do not agree with the title of the debate. The verses, I mean, there's the verses, you know, with playwriting and devising. Also because devising, I mean, as you all sort of agreed, it's such a verb. I mean, you have the most mortal enemies in that bag of devising. It's a bit like post-dramatic, you know. You have people who, you know, whose work should, not the people itself, but whose work should hate each other in the same bag, post-dramatic. So I think devising, in a way, it's mostly about this, I think, this idea that before you start working, you negotiate the contract. So creating a piece is about not just go there and accomplish a contract that you negotiated already with an aesthetic or an ethic of working, but doing a piece is also negotiating these contracts, rethinking the aesthetics and the ethics of creating a piece. And in that sense, of course, devising is extremely interesting. And I find it particularly interesting in this sense of the issue of democracy and hierarchy. And in my own personal experience, the playwright is a very interesting element in devising work, which is it's an animal. It's an element that empowers everybody else in a way. So it's like, you know, in Portugal we had the revolution 40 years ago. The anniversary was yesterday, and the military, they took the coup, they took the power, and then they said, we're going to keep it for a few weeks until the elections. And what we promise is we won't run in the elections. We just keep it, and it's free and it's for you. You know, but now we don't want the dictatorship anymore, we don't want the war, so now we're going to organize elections and, you know, go and have fun. And in a way I see in the world of devising a playwright as someone who can empower people, when you say, with the words, also with the tradition, with the convention. How can the old world still be useful in this sort of devising world? Where I think a big issue on democracy and hierarchy is raised is when you have a director controlling the devising. I find that so much more conventional and old theater, and because then you have control on the aesthetics and a control on the contracts. While you play Ibsen, or I don't know, any of the plays were being shown here, you can control the aesthetics still upon these texts, even if he's alive and you have to put up with it all, or not. But I think with the director, there's a devising somehow also empowered historically in Europe, at least the director. And I think sometimes we focus too much on underlying the oldness of writing for theater, while I think playwrights are mostly involved with devising and doing. I mean, you don't see any playwrights in big literary fairs where they sell novels and poetry, and you see them in theaters. At least that's my experience from some geographies. And I would like to comment on this issue of the director also as a danger to devising. As someone who can crystallize devising and make it very old, very good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You had a very interesting. I think that's a very interesting thing. If you see devising as a tool for distributing power, or enabling the others to sort of, even the technicians should now have a part in this. Christ, everybody wants to have a piece of the cake. Well, and then you say, in my theater, I am the dictator. You say, I don't believe in this sort of.
I guess I'm old-fashioned then.
Do you make everything old, like Diego says?
Well,
this is a provocation, just so.
Well, the luxury of.
Don't say Diego says after your provocation.
No, it's my provocation.
I think the luxury of not getting work but making my own work is that I'm the one who can decide. It's my work, and I can decide with whom will I work. And that's the luxury. I don't have much money, so I need to find the right people and the right story, and in that short frame of time, we need to do great work together. And I need people who can give a lot, The more talents they have, the better. If they can play the guitar, sing beautifully, paint, write, that's great, that's a benefit. But somebody needs to have the last word and final decision. So I don't believe in democracy in the theater. I think that's too expensive. It takes too long time, too much time, and I don't have the money for it. So I need to. Yes, I'm a dictator. Yeah.
But the question again is, does it make it old? Is that a danger for the devising process, or could it be a tool? I'm just asking you.
At the end of the day, this is also a discussion about fashion in theater. What's the fashion today? And as I said, I was afraid of being a cover band. That's because, the ones who use a writer and a play are the big institutions. That's the idea. But again, I just want to make my own work, and I really love that work. And I'll do whatever to make it come alive.
Devising is now also part of the institutional work, which is interesting. And in an institution, at least in Norway, I'm working at the state-owned theatre myself, and we do devising, but we do it in the same way as we do everything else. Yeah. We have the 8 weeks, we have the director, we have the technicians doing their routes, and we have the actors on the payroll, and they get to pick. They don't, we try to say who wants to be a part of the devising project, but if they don't really want to, they have to. They know they're still slaves, and I can see that, for it to really be non-hierarchical or a real different process, then you have to in some way also change the rules around the other parts of it. To really give the technicians a possibility to be a part of it, you have to do. You also have to break with some kind of fundamental structure that the state theatre or the institutions have. Christina.
No, I was just thinking when you were talking, I really so much agree with you about this dilemma, sort of having a director, and the deal is we are all going in for it, and the actors give everything but in the end it's the director who decides which parts will be in the show. So it's a dilemma, and one often says that devising is a way of getting more free or something, becoming more free, and you can talk about it as the opposite. You get less freedom as an actor, but with a text, with a role, which is yours, and it's up to you to interpret it. You can perform your professionality and have your space, which perhaps you won't have in devising. So it's very complex, and of course, very much depending on the director, which kind of person she or he is.
Yeah, that's my point, because I think talking about democracy is like a false discussion in a way, because it really depends on the way people collaborate. So sometimes I'll work with a light technician that really wants to be a part of the process. So if I'm in a good mood, that will work very well. Sometimes I work with a light technician who doesn't want to have anything to say in the discussion. So then the hierarchy is different, and I think every collaboration is different every time. So and every democracy on earth is also very different. So there's also the issue of that we do try to. Again, I think you should try to work with the people that inspire you, and you should try to make them inspired as well. And then you shouldn't be, or at least I don't want to be, occupied by the idea of that there's framework that I have to adapt to in any way. That I want to be free when I make theater, and sometimes that might be with a text. And I think again that there's as you said, there shouldn't be an opposite, but we should be thankful that devising entered theater in the way that it did at the time that it did, because we needed it, and we need to have more tools of doing what we want, because people have different ideas. I have things in my head that I really want to make, that I know that there's been no plays written about. And then thankfully there's people who's been developed stuff so that I can do also things from my own perspective, and I think that this whole kind of big fan of methods is really what we should be thankful for.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
Because I think there's always, if we are going to think in terms of power, because you're talking in terms of power, but actually everybody in the theater has power. Because when I work with an actor and I really like to do him something and he doesn't want to do it, he's not doing it. I can't make an actor do something. Everybody in this process, which I think is good, has his power. And of course some powers look a little bit more power than other powers. But I'm a director and I can assure you, your power is so limited. It's so limited, you wouldn't believe it in a way. So I think when you work, and devising is a way of working, is just to get out of this power thing and just to get everybody right in place, do what they like to do and what they can do the best. Because frankly, I had a great technician, and he was the first always that I asked, do you think this will work, or don't you think? And then he would say yes or no. He would be completely honest with me. I would always believe him. Now he's retired. I have another technician. I will not dream asking him it, because I don't trust his answer, you know? So that's exactly what you said. So I think you have to overcome the power and realize that everybody has power. So okay, everybody has power. So what are we going to do now together?
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. But I think it's such a wonderful place to end, because we're going to see a reading of a play called The Sadness and Joy in the Life of Giraffes, who maybe is a show of somebody realizing their power. And I think we should bring this discussion onwards until after that, and bring the play into that discussion as well, because we're going to have tea and cakes afterwards, and then everybody can join together in that discussion. But this is the last panel we're going to have for this weekend, and I want to thank everybody who participated. I'm also, have the joy to be trying to handle this discussion. I want to just end with some very, very few comments myself. Yesterday, we talked about the circles of control, the control inside yourself, the family,
the neighborhood, your religion, your government, and in the end in Palestine, the occupation, for instance. And then today we've talked about breaking those circles of control and finding strategies for breaking those circles. And theater's place for liberation and emancipation and enabling each other to have that power. And I think that's such an incredibly wonderful thing to discuss at a cafe theater like this. The idea of being in a modern time, then it's sort of taken over by a postmodern time, then that's taken over by a post-postmodern time. I think in a way I feel like I'm at the end of some kind of chain, and I really have this wonderful feeling that we might be in something that isn't post but is pre, something that is before something, that there could be something beautiful happening if we realign ourselves with each other. If the theater is a laboratory for everyone inside it, the playwrights, the actors, the owners of the houses, and the audience. And I'm looking forward to doing that work with you all in the future. So thank you very much for having me here.